What's up, everybody? I am Hoops and Hip Hop, and welcome back to another episode of the Pokeblock Podcast. Now, as we are basically 2 weeks away from Pokemon Sword and Shield, we are going to be talking about more Pokemon Sword and Shield stuff, just because that is definitely everything that is being talked about in the Pokemon community. We're getting to that point of it's finally here. We're just about to the finish line in terms of just all of this time we've been waiting. So we're going to be having a conversation once again about Sword and Shield. And today, for the first time ever on this show, which is kind of crazy considering how long we've been going, I actually have a guest with me to help discuss Sword and Shield. And that would be the owner of UCast Studios, Marques. Say hello to the people, Marques.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Yeah, this is Marcus. I host the talk spot on this network, which is an interview kind of show, and Hoops has actually been on that show. That was probably a couple months or so ago. Do you remember we did that Super Smash Bros. Episode?
Yeah. It was like pretty early on when it was only like a few weeks in or something like that.
Yeah,
But
exactly. So it's been a little while, but yeah, I mean, I've been kind of more of a, I mean, I guess, yeah, I'd say kind of more of a casual Pokemon fan, but I've played every entry, every generation that's come out. So I've been playing Pokemon games for like 20 years now. So I mean, I've kind of slept through the franchise for a long time. I mean, I'm not a competitive player or anything like that, but yeah, no, I've been a fan of the franchise for a long time. So I mean, I'm always excited when a new Pokemon generation's coming out. So definitely looking forward to talking a little bit about it today.
yeah, and that's kind of the thing I wanted to, I guess, use you for. I'm totally using you right now. But I wanted to, because you said you're more of a casual fan. And so I kind of wanted to discuss the game with you just based on your perspective, since you're more just like relaxed in terms of what you know about the game, how you perceive it, just your entire experience with the Pokemon franchise in general. Whereas, especially like on YouTube and in the Pokemon community, so many of us are like hardcore, nose to the grindstone type of fans that are just like, we soak up every little bit of information that we can. And it creates definitely a different perspective in terms of just like what we think of the games, like the overall community perception of what's going on with these titles, as far as all the controversy and the problems and everything. And so I thought it would be really cool to kind of get the opinion and the thoughts of someone like you who's like into it but isn't like super intense and crazy about Pokemon at the same time, just to kind of see what a more, I guess, like a casual standard type of person like thinks of all this stuff that's going on. So I think this will be really interesting to kind of get some of your thoughts
Yeah,
about everything that's going on.
yeah, no, and I totally agree with you. And it seems like, from my perspective, like, like watching even your videos and, seeing the comments on the videos, or even watching other people's, videos about the new games coming out, Sword and Shield, I just feel like, I don't know, this game, in my opinion, or these games, they seem, I don't remember Pokemon entries being so controversial in the past, just to be honest with you. Like, for example, I mean, I know a lot of people have talked about the graphics. That I watched one guy, I can't remember his YouTube channel's name. He like just laid into the graphics for like, I feel like 30 minutes, and he was just like dissecting everything. And at least I personally, I've never seen a video like that on YouTube about any of the entries. Like, I don't remember watching a video about that, for X and Y or Sun and Moon at all. So yeah, I don't know. This entry does seem, I don't know. I mean, in your opinion, I mean, do you think this one has been a little bit more controversial than, let's say, at least Sun and Moon?
Oh yeah, easily. Like there's never been a Pokemon game that's been more controversial in its lead up to release than this one. And it all stemmed from that announcement that there was going to be no national decks, because everything was smooth sailing and it was fine before that happened. So, and I'm glad you brought up the graphics, because I think that's a good place to start. So just straight up, what do you personally think of the graphics? How do you think they look?
I feel like, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think they look like current generation graphics. Like, I don't feel like this game to me looks like a game that would come out in 2019. But I also don't think it looks as bad as I said. Like the person that made that very long video about it, and as others have kind of talked about before. I don't know. I don't feel it looks like horrible, but I do think that Game Freak, obviously, they manage or they create games for one of the biggest franchises in the world, or the biggest franchise in the world. I think in terms of like how valuable the Pokemon franchise is, but I do feel like they could look better. I do think that's kind of a legitimate gripe. Is that again, like it doesn't look horrible and it doesn't look like GameCube era. I would say it doesn't look GameCube era, but GameCube came out almost 20 years ago. But does this game look like something that would come out on the Wii U? In my opinion, I could say yeah to that. I mean, let's say you compare the graphics of Sword and Shield to something like I don't know, Gears of War 5. I mean, in my opinion, there's a demonstrable difference between the two. And I don't know, I feel like if somebody were to call out Game Freak and say, oh, why aren't the graphics better? I feel like that's a legitimate concern. I mean, I feel like with Pokemon, that's never really been a franchise that's been known for graphics. I mean, it's never really had the best look per se. So you kind of know what you're getting with that. But I don't know. I just feel like this was a little bit of a, I don't know, missed opportunity. Because in my opinion, I feel like when X and Y came out for the 3DS, like I just felt like, like everyone was so hyped about it. Like, oh my gosh, it's 3D. Like it looks cool. Like, like this is like, I just remember the hype for X and Y was just so positive. And I thought it was like, wow, like the graphics, I thought, wow, this looks great. The look looks great. At least at that time, when it came out 6 years ago. But yeah, I don't know for Sword and Shield. I mean, I'll still get the game. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know. What do you think?
So basically, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying as far as it could look better, but it doesn't look bad. I think I think it looks really good. Like, I think there are spots that are like it does have low points in terms of its graphics as far as like, there's that classic like tree example or different things like that. So it does have like its flaws graphically, but overall, I do think it looks just really good as far as like the standard of it being like a 2019 game, as you were saying. Well, yeah, it does not look as good as Gears of War 5, but at the same time, that's because it's not Gears of War 5. Like a game like
That's
Gears
true.
is it's like hyper realistic. It's obviously made for the Xbox One X, which is like the Xbox is just like it's a graphical powerhouse. That's what it does. Whereas Pokemon, I mean, it's not that Pokemon's ever had bad graphics, but it's never been. That's not why you play a Pokemon game. Is for the graphics. And
Exactly.
so like as I feel like it's as long as it's held to its standard of like the platform it's releasing on, which is the Switch, which is an HD console. So as long as it's like an HD quality game, then as far as like the style they take and like I don't know, the whole visual experience they give you, I feel like as long as it's holding up that HD quality, then I feel like we can be satisfied, we can be okay. And in my opinion, like I said, there are the flaws here and there, but it's definitely an HD quality game. Like if you look at some of there's some particular shots in the different trailers of just like the wild area or the Pokemon battles or just the models of the Pokemon themselves. They all look really clean and polished and nice, especially if you compare it to like Sun and Moon or X and Y, because those games are like really unbelievable. I mean, obviously, like for 3DS game, like we all were able to enjoy them just fine, obviously. But when you just look at the graphics, they're incredibly like pixelated and rough around the edges.
Yeah.
And these games, Sword and Shield, they have none of that. They're like I said, models are smooth and polished. The world is like way more expansive and has such a bigger scope to it. And kind of regardless of how you feel, I personally feel like these are, like, factually speaking, the best Pokemon games as far as the main series goes that we've ever had in terms of graphics. Like they're definitely the best looking so far. And because of that, and because of just the general fact that people never have played or expected anything super amazing from Pokemon in terms of graphics, I think the outcry comes from two different places. I think it comes from the whole National Dex situation. When the National Dex situation happened, everyone freaked out, and that's when they decided to just microcosmically just analyze and nitpick everything about this game, just to kind of like, I don't even know what the purpose was, because it was like people were mad about Pokemon not getting in the game, and so that made them hate on the graphics because they just decided they wanted to tear this game apart in any way, shape, or form they could, just because it didn't give them all the Pokemon in a single game. It's kind of a weird situation to me. So I feel like it came partly from that, and then I think also there was a lot of expectations for this game just because it's the very first Pokemon game on a home console, which people have been wanting and waiting for a long time. And so people were just like expecting Breath of the Wild instantly, which I think honestly I think that type of expectation, like I understand it, but I think it's those people's fault for expecting that type of thing more so than it is Game Freak's fault for not delivering that. Because how could you possibly expect any developer, whether it's Game Freak, Nintendo, whoever, to go from 20 years worth of just developing on home consoles and the most recent game they developed being a 480p game to instantly with their next title developing a 1080p Breath of the Wild photorealistic masterpiece? Like, you're not going to make that jump. No one is going to make that jump. It just isn't reasonable to expect that. And so I think for where we are in the timeline of events that have preceded this game, I think it's a natural state of progression. Like, could it be better? Yeah, it could be better. But I think that's also something that Game Freak has in mind, because they have tended to kind of stagger their releases when it comes to a console's life cycle, to where the first game that they release on a new system, a good example of this being X and Y, they release it obviously with a graphical upgrade, but then they leave room for them to improve as they continue to release games on that single console, so that not every single game is going to be the exact same on that console. And so, for example, with the 3DS, you go from X and Y, which was the first game, to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which was the last. And Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is like way better graphically, and it pushes the 3DS to the limit way more than Pokemon X and Y did. And I personally feel like the same sort of thing will happen with the Switch generation of Pokemon games, where Sword and Shield is like the entry level, but then by the time we get to the last game on the system, whether it's Generation 9 or Diamond Pearl Remakes, whatever that last game is for the Switch, it's going to be like so much more polished, just because Game Freak is like leaving that amount of room to grow, so you can have that improvement with every title, and it's not just kind of like a plateau for the next 5 years or so.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think I agree with you that the whole National Dex thing, that was where, yeah, it really kind of soured a lot of people. And I think you're right that a lot of the issues that have stemmed from that, in terms of like the harsh fan reactions, I think it did stem from the National Dex. So like you said, like the graphics, and then the people, maybe if they say, oh, Gigantamax or Dynamax, it's like, that's just basically making Pokemon big. We want Mega Evolutions, let's say. Like, I feel like all the other controversies have, stemmed from that. I feel like your common, like your casual fan, or I mean, even have to imagine too. I mean, let's say some kid is buying Sword and Shield for the first time this Christmas. I mean, if they're only like, let's say like 8 years old, I mean, this could even be the first generation Pokemon game they even play potentially. If they're 7 years old. But yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that, it was a National Dex that kind of led to this other stuff that led to people being really angry. Because, I mean, yeah, from a graphical standpoint, like you were saying, I mean, I've never really played Pokemon for that. I mean, obviously I don't want to play a game that's hard to look at, or, but I mean, when I was a child, I mean, I remember when I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade, that's when I got, I actually played Pokemon Red version for the first time. And yeah, I mean, at the time, I thought the graphics looked good. I was pretty content with playing it. I mean, if you look back now, I mean, the sprites don't look very, accurate to how the Pokemon look today. But I've never really played for the graphics, but yeah, and I feel like, I mean, this kind of, I guess, leads into the other idea of like these other maybe issues that people have. Like, I do feel like common or more casual fans, or even potential just common, buyers, let's just say, people that, maybe they've missed a couple Pokemon generations, but they're open to playing this because they own a Switch. I mean, I do think there are some things that some other maybe semi legitimate concerns they have. Like, I think one, for example, is, I mean, and we kind of talked about this before we recorded, but just the idea of like the lack of Pokemon. Like, I don't know. I mean, has there been like an official announcement of the sheer number of new Pokemon? Because to me, it seems like I feel like there's only been like a dozen or so announced. Like, I don't even know how many new Pokemon there's going to be this generation.
Right, and that's kind of like that's like the big mystery, I guess. We really don't know. In terms of new Pokemon, like brand new Pokemon, we have no idea how many there's going to be. We can reasonably expect there will be somewhere in the range of, I would say, 70 to 100, just because the lowest we've ever gotten in a new generation is 72, but the most is like 156. So we know it's going to be somewhere in there. So like around 100-ish, but we don't really know for sure. And like for this is kind of an interesting juxtaposition, I guess, that you bring up, like as a more casual fan compared to the hardcore fans, because as we were talking prior to the show, the hardcore fans are actually very welcoming of the limited amount of information, just because we don't want to see every single thing before we get the game. Sun and Moon, as I told you earlier, that was a huge problem with that game. Was like the marketing was phenomenal and it was super exciting during the build-up because they were revealing everything, but then they used up all of that excitement in the marketing, basically, to where once the game came out, there were literally, like, I would say there were probably like as little of like new stuff we know about Sword and Shield right now before the game has launched. That's basically what was left to discover in Sun and Moon, and probably like less than that. Like it was so overkill, and that kind of ruined Sun and Moon, like the experience of it for a lot of people, because otherwise there's a lot of things about those games that are really great, but just people couldn't get excited about it because it was kind of like spoiled for them. So within the community, that's kind of something that people are really happy about, because it just, like, we know enough to get excited and get hyped and know like that this is going to be a fun experience, but then the bulk of the stuff is still there waiting for us to discover it, which in my opinion is one of the biggest enjoyment, or it's one of the most enjoyable things about a Pokemon game, is to just discover all of that new stuff for yourself. So like when you brought up that comment about that was kind of like weird to you and it was almost like a bit of a concern, I thought that was pretty interesting, because I could maybe see that from just like an average consumer who's trying to like get information about the game. They might only see like, oh, we only know about 15 Pokemon, and yeah, I guess that's kind of an interesting dynamic depending on which way you look at it.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, the whole idea of, not spoiling it. And, I mean, you look at something, for example, like when the movie Endgame came out earlier this year. I mean, I feel like they did a pretty good job not spoiling it before it came out. But yeah, I mean, there's also, yeah, I guess a little bit of a line where it's like, I mean, we've even seen for the Dynamax and Gigantamax, like, only a handful of Pokemon using it. Like, one of them was Meowth and Pikachu. And it's like, even though I'm not much of a competitive player, I mean, I've obviously played, I've battled people that I know, and I just know realistically a lot of people, especially in the competitive scene, they're not really using Meowth or Pikachu. I mean, unless they had some kind of crazy special ability, people aren't really going to be using them. And I feel like, at least, again, even from like a competitive standpoint, the only one that I saw that actually had one of those two abilities that I think people would actually really be interested in using a lot would be Charizard. Because, I mean, I don't know Charizard's stats, and I know that his I forgot what his special move was. I thought it, or his special ability. I thought it was something like crazy unique, but I might be incorrect. But yeah, I don't know. To me, yeah, it is interesting where there is a lot of just unanswered questions. I mean, even for I mean, we don't even know what the starters evolution, their final forms are going to be. And I guess that also kind of leads into this idea too. Is this like, every generation it seems like there's one Pokemon that's looked upon to be like the I guess the I don't I'm trying to think of how to say it, like the mascot, or I guess the brand ambassador for that generation, like the big new iconic Pokemon, right? So like
Uh-huh.
in Sun and Moon it was Incineroar, X and Y was Greninja, and Diamond and Pearl was Lucario. Like, do you feel like I don't. It's interesting to me because I feel like right now we haven't seen the Pokemon that they're gonna want to be the new iconic Pokemon yet. I mean, I don't imagine it being one of the legendaries, and I don't imagine it being surf fetched either. Like, I feel like the iconic new Pokemon for this generation hasn't been released yet. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I can definitely see that too because usually, like last several generations, they always have kind of released. They've released a Pokemon basically slightly before the generation it appeared in was released, and it became kind of like you're saying the mascot, the poster child for that generation. Whether it was like Lucario for Generation 4, or you had Zoroark for Generation 5. You could say like Lugia for Generation
Yeah.
2, or those types of Pokemon. We definitely have not had that type of Pokemon for this generation yet, which does make it a bit interesting. Uh, I mean, there's definitely going to be that kind of Pokemon though, just because, like you said, they always have that type of Pokemon that's basically supposed to be the representative for the generation. So it's kind of interesting that they haven't used that same, I guess, marketing tactic that they have in the past. But I don't know. I guess it leaves a lot. It leaves a lot to the imagination at the same time that they haven't shown it off. And because like that there's going to be a Pokemon like that, because there always is. There's got to be something that's going to fill that role. To me, I just feel like it makes it exciting to just eventually find out and discover who it is, because with like the amount of importance that Pokemon is going to carry in terms of being an ambassador for the generation, it's going to be like a really cool Pokemon. So if you find that type of really cool Pokemon just like in the game for yourself and you stumble upon it, I think it makes for that much more of a wow factor, and like it puts more of an impression in your mind versus seeing it like in the anime or a trailer or something like that. So
Well, and also too, I think for a lot of those types of Pokemon, I mean, they kind of get that treatment a lot through the anime and through like promotional products and commercials and stuff. So I mean, some of these guys, they kind of like Greninja, for example. Like I feel like when he was released in X and Y, I feel like he became more of the spokesman for those games as time went on. As he was incorporated into the anime and included
mhm.
in Smash and all that stuff. So I mean, it probably doesn't have to be the like immediately that we'll see it, but yeah, no, I mean, I get you. I mean, that is kind of an interesting thing, that intrigue, and it makes you wonder too. I mean, is it going to be one of the starters? Like one of the starters is final evolution form? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's hard
Right.
to even tell what the starters' evolution is even going to look like.
Yeah, we like this. I can only really remember as far back as Generation 6, because before that I didn't really follow the Pokemon news like piece by piece the way I do now. But I honestly cannot remember a time where we did not know like even the middle evolutions of the starters before the game came out. There's still technically time for them to do that. And I do feel like they'll probably release like one more trailer in like November sometime before the game comes out. So they technically could still release that. But if we go into the game not even knowing what the middle evolutions for the starters are going to be, that's going to be crazy. And I was arguing in the last episode of the podcast that like people during the Gigantamax trailer were kind of upset because they wanted starter evolutions, and the Gigantamax thing, like it was cool, but it wasn't that like blockbuster like bit of information, that we kind of all want. And I kind of made the argument that, well, we're a month away from the game, or we're 3 weeks away from the game at that point. You already know whether or not you're gonna get the game. If you're following the information so closely to the point where like you're watching every trailer like this, you know you're gonna get the game. So at that point, since you know you're gonna get the game, and this getting this information isn't like you're not dependent on it to make a purchase decision, then wouldn't you rather just like wait the 3 weeks that are left to find that out in the game for yourself, as opposed to it being essentially spoiled for you prior to the game's release?
Yeah.
That's kind of like honestly, I feel like that like really you just want the information. It's not about like trying to decide whether or not you're going to buy the game. You want the information because you're interested in it and you want to know more because you're going to buy the game. So why not just have some patience, wait a couple more weeks, and have it just be that much better in the game itself, as opposed to getting it like shown off in a trailer, and then when you play the game it's like you already know and you don't have that, there's not that level of excitement.
I mean, I think you're totally right. It's almost like, imagine, when you're a kid and you have, your parents put, your Christmas gift under the tree, let's say, December 10th. And now, here you are, you're like a couple days away from Christmas, where you're going to open all of your gifts on Christmas. And it's like, oh, you're asking your parents, oh, I want to know what it is. And it's like, well, you've waited all this time, like what you said. I mean, we've known about Sword and Shield for, I don't know, what has it been, like 5 months or something, or 6? I mean, it's been months that we've known the two games exist. We've seen the footage, like we know enough about it. And like you were saying too, the people that are more hardcore fans, they're going to buy it regardless. And, most likely they're probably going to like it. I mean, there's probably Game Freak is going to do something stupid and something cheap where they're going to allow in every Pokemon through the national decks. Like they'll introduce it and it'll be DLC or whatever it's going to be. Like they'll probably figure out some way to incorporate that. And, that'll probably be something that will annoy the more hardcore fans. But, I mean, I think, from, the fans' perspective, I mean, I think this game will probably go down as well as any other game. And I think, this whole thing about the whole mystery intrigue around it, I mean, yeah, I could see how that would be. Like, if you were, like, a huge Pokemon fan and you were like, I just want to know everything about the games, I could see how that would be, like, a little annoying or a little frustrating. But at the same token, it's like, I don't know. I mean, there probably won't be a new generation. Like Generation 9 most likely won't come out for like 3 years or whatever it'll be. And I don't know. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's like the cool Christmas thing. It's like, once you open the gift on Christmas and you played with it, it's 2 days later, the gift kind of loses its intrigue a little bit. And I don't know. It's like in this situation, it's like, maybe just enjoy the not knowing. And then when the game comes out, you'll be surprised that, there's an alternate form of Poliwrath in the game or something stupid like that,
Right, yeah, and like you were saying, like it's basically like your parents buying you like the big gift for Christmas on December 10th while you're there in the store. So like what you're getting, and then it's just like 2 weeks later it's just wrapped up. Like you're like unwrapping that gift is not going to be as exciting or mind-blowing as it is if you just like don't know and you go into it blind. I remember another example I think I made in the previous episode was in X and Y. We didn't know the final evolutions to the starters, and so I remember specifically like the moment when I picked Chespin in the game, so I remember when it finally evolved into Chestnut for the first time. Like I remember that specific moment just because it was such a wow factor, like a cool moment. Whereas with like Sun and Moon, we already knew him ahead of time, and I can't even tell you, like I don't remember that moment of me evolving like Rowlet into Decidueye for the first time. So like I did not have that level of impression, and I don't have that good memory now with Gen 7 that I did with Gen 6. And so those types of things, you don't think about it in the moment because you just want the information now. You want that instant gratification. But in the long run, it makes a big difference because your opinion of a game has to do with basically your recollection of how you felt while you were playing it, as much as it does like the actual fun you're having while you're playing it in the moment. And I think if you're able to basically kind of have all those types of good thoughts and memories and experiences that you can call back on after you've gone and finished a game, it makes it that much more, it just makes it that much more valuable to you and like better in your opinion, which is a big factor. And that all just comes from just experiencing the game for yourself and not spoiling it and things like that. And then, uh, yeah, I think that's so. I think as far as what you're saying, like people experience or having this game go down is like just as good as any other Pokemon game. I think that's going to be the big thing that Sword and Shield do, because there's so many people that are just hating and wailing on this game and expecting it to be trash. I think it's going to shut a lot of people up. Like, I know it's not going to be perfect, but I fully expect it to, once it comes out, get really good reviews, be critically acclaimed, and I expect it to kind of like shut some of those people up and prove that it's a Pokemon game that's just as valuable and just as like good of quality as any of the others.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, maybe not to go like too much on a tangent a little bit, but like there right now that there's been a big move. I'm sure you've seen the last, I don't know, like 3 years or so, where there's kind of this dichotomy between like established franchises doing something to anger their fan bases. And I mean, we've seen it a lot with different franchises, like especially like more recently, like Game of Thrones, where I know a lot of fans were very angry at the showrunners for how they, what they ended up making. And I feel like before people give Pokemon that treatment of being like, well, Game Freak and Nintendo are, they're making a subpar product, or the, like before everyone jumps into that, like I would caution and say, hey, like, Pokemon, Game Freak and Pokemon Company and the game so far, they haven't done anything to totally push us off. Like, even if by some chance Sword and Shield end up being very mediocre entries, let's just say that were to happen. I mean, this isn't the same thing. I mean, every company that makes like that's in the business of making new entries in IP, making new movies or games or books or whatever, you're bound to even have one or two that are less liked than the others. So I would say before people like just totally trash on Pokemon and like want to like see the death of the main entry games, I would caution against that and say, hey, like, this isn't a situation where, Nintendo is purposely trying to like, stick their finger in the eye of the fans. It might just be they just do some things you disagree with. And there's a lot of things over the years that, Pokemon games do that baffle me. I mean, it baffles me that Mega Evolutions weren't used more. It baffles me that like that whole system being able to call a person that you had battled and call them in for a rematch and they're stronger. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it baffles me that they never brought that back. But Nintendo does a lot of weird stuff. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it's weird to me in Mario Odyssey that Mario takes over the body of a human, and even though he's a human. So I mean,
Right.
and I mean, I think that's kind of maybe that's like more of a cultural thing. I mean, with Nintendo, because they're a Japanese company, maybe they just handle things differently. And yeah, I mean, it could be one of those things too, where I'm kind of a little bit of that middle ground between, like the newer stuff and an old head. And sometimes things change. I mean, properties that you were a big fan of in the, that came out in the 80s or 90s, and they're redoing it now, like let's say even like Dragon Ball Z, and doing it now as Dragon Ball Super. It's like, yeah, I mean, for the old heads, Dragon Ball Super will never be as good as Dragon Ball Z. The animation won't be the same. Everything will be so much different about it. And people, yeah, you can, dump all over Dragon Ball Super. You can dump all over the new Pokemon games or any of those franchises. But sometimes there does need to be some changes that have to happen. And for these games too, for Sword and Shield, yeah, it's like, so they're making gigantic Pokemon. And, it's, at this point makes you think like, wow, what's next? I mean, I know a lot of the speculation for Sword and Shield was that the Pokemon were going to have like an armored system where they were
Uh-huh.
going to like be like knights fighting. And,
Right.
that kind of sounds a little zany too, to be, to be honest with you. Like Charizard dressed as a knight with a lance or something, you know,
Right. Right. Yeah.
I think that would look bizarre, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you're right. I think, like if you're going into the games and you feel like you're not going to be pleased and you feel like Game Freak has made a subpar product, if you're thinking that in your mind already, you're probably going to think that after the games come out. But if you're if you're kind of more just like, yeah, I'm just gonna see what I get. I mean, I don't know. I think probably most people would be pleasantly surprised if it's just going in with kind of an open mind. And like you said, yeah, I mean, you can nitpick. I'm sure once the game comes out, I'm sure those same people that complained about the graphics and maybe even lack of Pokemon, I'm sure they're going to have a lot of information to use. I'm sure there's going to be some horrible, scene. There's going to be some horrible parts of the game where it looks terrible graphically. And it's like, it is what it is. I mean, we're playing games where we're fighting with monsters and your child walking around with a gigantic head. It is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, this isn't like you don't play Pokemon for the storytelling, and like you said, you don't really play it for the graphics. You play it. A lot of people they play it for the nostalgia. They play it for the sense of adventure. They play it because they've been playing for years, and there's a deeper connection to Pokemon. And yeah, I mean, I'm gonna get it, and I think too. I mean, if you're even a person that has a Switch, I mean, I think now the lineup for the Switch is actually pretty good. Like now with this Pokemon game, and I mean, I don't know. That's probably, I guess, a little bit of a tangent, but I feel like, yeah, I agree with you overall. I think most likely it will be well received. I think it'll sell a lot of copies, and I think like what you're saying too, you're kind of alluding to this idea that not knowing everything, there might be some stuff that really blows us away. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if there was new forms, or like if like Lapras got an evolution form, or Dragonite had an alternate form. I mean, I know there's a lot of emphasis on the first generation, so I
Right.
wouldn't be surprised if something crazy like that comes out of left field.
Yeah, I just overall, I just don't think once it's all said and done and everyone's got their hands on the complete experience and has completely gone through this game instead of just judging it for like the bits and pieces we've been drip fed, like once everyone has that full experience, we're not going to be having this discussion. Like the controversy and like the arguments and all that stuff, that's going to be a thing of the past. Like people are still going to disagree with like the national decks being cut. They're still going to say like, oh, they shouldn't have done that, blah blah blah. But by and large, like when we talk about Sword and Shield a year from now, people are going to be like, that's a good game. Like that's a quality experience. And we're not going to be talking about these little stupid, like nitpicky type of things. Cause like people will realize that like the good stuff that's in the game massively outweighs these little flaws that we're noticing right now. But I
I
think
totally
that's
agree.
about, I think that's about time, right?
Yeah, no, I think that, yeah, that was good. I mean, yeah, hopefully this episode doesn't get totally panned in the game. Hopefully the game doesn't utterly suck and then this gets
Oh,
totally panned, but that would be unfortunate. But yeah, no, I agree with most of your points, and yeah, I think we had a good conversation.
yeah, me too. As far as that goes, I mean, even my least favorite generation in Generation 5, Black and White, like I still thought those were good games. So I don't think
Exactly.
there's too much to worry about because I don't think I've ever legitimately played a bad Pokemon game besides like Hey You Pikachu or something like that.
Yeah, no,
But
I mean, I agree with you. All the like all the main entry games, I haven't played one that I regret playing.
right, yeah, they all have their massively good things, and even if they do stuff you disagree with, like the experience is still there. And so, yeah, there's definitely nothing to worry about as far as them being good games. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's where we'll have to go and wrap it up before we run on for too long. So thank you, Marcus, for joining me. It was really awesome to have like an actual person to bounce back and forth with. Definitely want to try and do this more often.
All right.
Um,
Well, definitely.
as
Well, thank you so much, Hoops, for bringing me on. And yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to the games, and yeah, I look forward to talking to you again too sometime.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're for everyone listening out there, wherever you're listening, be sure to follow the show. Comment if you're on YouTube. Let us know your thoughts. And you can follow me as well on my own channel, Hoops and Hip Hop. And then, as always, next Friday we'll be back with another discussion. It's going to be awesome. That at that point we'll only be a week away, so I guess we'll see if we get any more trailers or information or anything like that. But it's going to be interesting to say the least. So, with all that being said, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will catch you guys in the next one.